Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink and get ready for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in a new video. So subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and let's get started. How did karma deal with your worst boss? They hired a new sales manager, Mike, from the dealership where our general sales manager, Gary, had just been relocated from 6 months earlier when I was selling automobiles. Mike was reportedly Gary's protege, and Gary hired him to train for a position as general sales manager. Therefore, Mike was a bit of a jerk who never listened to us salespeople when we claimed that we could sell a certain automobile for X amount of dollars and that if he would just agree to deal at $1,000 more than that, we would have a sale right away. Otherwise, they would go. It took some time for him to start paying attention to us. Anyhow, this guy would have observed that I worked 6 days a week from opening to closing. I didn't always sell the most, but I also wasn't the least. He only knew about the deals I made with him, as opposed to the other sales manager, or Gary, that I more than made up for my lack of sales volume with profits. In other words, I would sell 12 cars and bring in a not insignificant amount more money for the dealership than someone selling 25 cars would. Anyway, my mom was given a cancer diagnosis, and following her surgery recovery, she began chemotherapy. I promised to talk to work about taking her every week since the dealership was only a 20-minute drive from their house and my dad worked an hour away. Her appointment ended up being at a time where I could take her, and when my dad arrived toward the end, he would take her home. When I get at work, Gary's already there. I explained the situation to him and explained that I have to leave work every Wednesday at 2 p.m. to take my mother to chemotherapy and that I should be able to return by 4:30 p.m. He advised me to take care of my mother and to not worry about going back inside. He would look after me. After speaking with Gary for about 20 minutes, the dealership's general manager, James, enters my office and says that he was informed of my situation by Gary. He advises me to take whatever action is necessary, not to worry about coming in on Wednesdays, and to take the entire day off if I so choose. They will ensure that I am taken care of financially, so I shouldn't worry about that. I went to talk to Mike as soon as he was situated up after he arrived inside. I explained to him the situation. Mom has cancer. Wednesdays are early release days. In response, he questioned how I would sell automobiles if I left early. My response was that I wouldn't be and that my mother was more important to me than that. Is there a way to schedule the appointments earlier in the day since afternoon is when people start showing up to look at automobiles? He claimed that selling cars is his main focus. I responded, no, that's not possible and it's not something I'd think about. I should think about it because I need all the sales I can get, or better yet, think about switching careers, he suggested, noting that I've only been here 2 years and I'm only selling 10 to 12 cars a month. He has also seen the commission slips on our deals, perhaps 3 each month. I asked if he was firing me. He stated, as soon as I talk to Gary, it'll be official. I nodded my agreement, walked out of his office with a box in hand, went to Gary's, and departed. What the F is going on? He demanded. I recalled the exchange and realized that I had never before seen someone become that red. James received the same treatment. Bye? WTF? Tell him the conversation. I returned to my office to pack my belongings. I could see right inside the sales tower. It was wonderful. After Gary attacked him for around 20 minutes, other salespeople started actively discouraging consumers from entering the dealership. The office personnel from the second floor came down to see what was going on. James enters just as Gary is finishing. He tears him a new one for 5 minutes before taking him upstairs to his office for another 30. Guess you knew by my reaction that you weren't going to get fired since that box is still empty, huh? Gary commented when he entered my office. James descended with Mike by his side. Mike apologized briefly to me before leaving, and James nearly said the same thing. James used the intercom to summon all salesmen to the sales floor for a meeting to announce Mike's departure from our organization. There was not a frown in the room. I later learned that Mike was on the verge of being fired as a result of complaints from customers and salespeople that he would try to intercept as they were leaving after they said we had one chance to make an offer as close to X amount of dollars as we can get, or if they had to leave to pick up kids or whatever. He wasn't nice and was sometimes downright rude. I was merely the circumstance that brought it to an end. And I went into the conversation thinking that Gary or James had to have called him as a heads up and that the conversation would go very different, or that he was messing with me at first, but none of that happened. For what it's worth though, in fact, I'd say Gary and James went above and above what they had promised. I started receiving commission slips for transactions that I couldn't place. Some were for small $100 commissions, others were for enormous $800 commissions, and they were all dated on Wednesdays. They apparently asked some GMs at sister dealerships if they had an orphan offer and if they would send it to them while they were contacting their family and friends. I work at an Austin downtown barbecue restaurant. My old general manager had a tendency to be intimidating at times. He would joke around with me almost every day about how stuff wasn't done last night, despite the fact that I always left the business in fine shape at the end of the night. Then, when I would inquire as to what I had forgotten, because let's face it, we all occasionally do, he would not frequently have any complaints. He calls me on Sunday night at around 5 o'clock and asks whether I'll be open on Mondays as he wants the holiday off. I concur because I am in need of as many hours as possible, so I consent to working a double 16-hour shift the following day from opening to closure. The same crap was spoken on Tuesday morning about how the store looked horrible and why I didn't clean things because it was moving so slowly last night. He brings up the slow night/cleaning issue as I inquire as to what might be wrong, so I list off a few things that I organized or cleaned that night. It was really sluggish. Then he assures me that he's joking and that the shop looked nice. I'm aware of because the day before I worked 16 hours on it so he could take the holiday off. He's being foolish, disrespectful, and entirely unappreciative of my labor, but I'm not going to respond and give him something to work with, so we just kind of eat lunch together. I'm therefore in the back sending a text before beginning some preparation. Dumb A is going to leave, so I won't have to put up with his constant chatter, and will have the store to myself for a bit. He then tried to yank the phone out of my hands as he came around the corner, yelling, "Give me that phone!" "Hey man, watch out, you're gonna damage my phone," I warned as I was about to drop the phone. "So?" "What? So? That's my phone, dude, you nearly made me throw it away." "So what are you gonna do about it, B?" "Listen man, I really don't have to effing sit here and listen to this BS. I said, "Well, there's the door," and I left, called the owner, explained what had transpired, and received a paid holiday. Later that evening, after numerous phone calls from the jerk GM threatening anything from my firing to simply reducing my hours, he eventually called back with an obviously forced apology. He made one of those "if I did anything wrong" excuses. It wasn't a sincere sorry. So I clarified it for him. "You attempted to rob me of my phone, what is that? Then when I told you not to do that because you might break my phone, you said, 'So what are you gonna do about it, B?' That is an abusive combination of a bodily threat and an insult. You then pointed to the door when I respectfully replied that I didn't have to listen to your garbage. If you didn't know, it is exactly what you did incorrectly." He claimed to have lost all memory and to have passed out. What the heck is that about? The owner gives me the job the following morning, and I accept. Now that I'm the general manager, the idiot bully is no longer employed there. What am I going to do about it, B? I'm going to take your effing job. What's the best HOA retaliation you've ever heard of or done yourself? Despite not being personally involved, I was nevertheless involved because of my area of business. Depositions were ongoing in a case involving a group of people suing the HOA where they resided in downtown Chicago. Other neighbors were being bullied because of how they voted on topics or because they weren't showing up to meetings. Paper bags of trash were being left at the door of one neighbor by another neighbor. They both appeared to be extremely vengeful, bitter, and downright unpleasant, bent out of shape about the shame of this case being argued in public, and they were both female attorneys in their 40s. They would block a car so the driver couldn't leave for work, or park there on the way home as a retaliation for how someone had voted on an issue, or they would park in someone else's spot. take their deliveries from the lobby, and tape or place vile notes under each other's doors. One morning, as they were leaving for work, two other female neighbors got into a physical altercation in the lobby in full view of their doorman, who observed with what appeared to be amusement but refrained from intervening. While I was listening, I couldn't help but think, jerks paying that much to live in a nut house that they've all created. I can't tell you the details of the end of the case, but that HOA in that neighborhood was disbanded. They spent a lot of money on all the legal expenses. We were in a condo that was part of an HOA. After pickup on Friday, one of the requirements was to place your trash can back in your yard. We asked a neighbor to install it because we were leaving town, but he went out after work on Friday and placed it in our yard instead on Saturday morning. When he couldn't find us for some reason, the president started picking on us for everything and wrote us a scathing letter about it. Now the revenge part. A few weeks later, my husband took our dog for an early morning stroll around the complex and discovered our HOA president dozing off in his running car in front of his garage. My husband returned home and contacted the police after failing to rouse him up. He was ultimately woken up by the police, who gave him a DUI because they knew he had driven home while intoxicated. Later, we learned that this wasn't his first offense, so he received many days in jail, a hefty fine, and the loss of his license. We were aware that he was intoxicated and that he had the option of handling the situation differently, but he was being a jerk for picking on us while exercising his special HOA presidential power, so why not dial him back a notch? He is currently powerless in the HOA. When I was a kid, the homeowners association where I lived had a regulation that said everyone had to take down their basketball hoops that were in their driveways because it was lowering the value of their homes. This took place in a neighborhood in which over 60% of the homes had children, yet the homeowners who served on the HOA were all senior citizens. Of course, all the families with kids didn't like it. They decided it was time for a change. The meeting that they had after they made the rule was the only one in which practically the whole community turned up. At that meeting, all of the HOA officials were booted off the board and new individuals who were more kid-friendly were elected to the board positions. When it was all said and done, they went from forbidding the installation of basketball hoops on driveways to constructing a full court adjacent to the swimming pool. It seems to me that doing what these old people were so desperate to forbid is the best sweet revenge. Oh yes, the whole old board despises all this new stuff, but they no longer have the power to stop it. As the head and CFO, yep, this was the official title to make oneself feel important, my neighbor used to be in charge of collecting the maintenance payments on behalf of our HOA. He would use lawn care businesses that he knew were owned and operated by illegal immigrants, and he would underpay them. He also paid for his daughter's college with HOA funding. Also, one time they wanted to put a lien on my house because I had taken off the hardtop on my Jeep and placed in my backyard, where nobody could see it, but my neighbor could see it from his second story when he looked into my backyard. People who act in this manner will eventually face their karma, as they say. One day, while I went about my business and grew irritated with my neighbor's behavior, I caught sight of something interesting. His Wi-Fi network had been left unsecured and all of his computers were set up as a single network. I couldn't help but wonder if it was my turn to level the playing field. I made the decision to follow his example and acted in the same way that anyone else would have. I sneakily accessed his unprotected Wi-Fi network and looked through the vast amount of data stored on his connected laptops. What I found stunned me and gave me confidence. Records of his financial mismanagement of the HOA were right there in plain sight, including proof that he underpaid lawn care providers and misappropriated money for his daughter's education. This was a veritable goldmine of proof of his unethical actions. With this fresh proof in my possessions, I understood it was imperative to act. I got in touch with the proper people, including the HOA board members, and gave them concrete proof of his wrongdoing. The decision to lie no longer made sense, and the repercussions were immediate and fair. My neighbor was abruptly fired as the HOA CEO and CFO. For his financial malfeasance, legal action was pursued against him, and the results were proportionate to the severity of his misconduct. He was exposed for his illicit activities, and justice was done. Ultimately, my neighbor gained important knowledge about the value of moral conduct and the repercussions of power abuse. His unscrupulous grip over the HOA was eventually removed, allowing our community to move forward honestly and fairly. Karma has definitely completed its round, bringing harmony back to our community. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and the comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for your support.